Hello there and welcome to the Talking City podcast, the Manchester City podcast from the Manchester Evening News. My name is Joe Bray and I'm delighted to be joined by, live from his kitchen, Simon Bajkowski. How are you doing, Si?
Yeah, good. It took a while for the light contrast to adjust from a normal room, but we've made it in the end. How are you? Made it back safely from Southampton?
Yeah, it was... they put the South in Southampton with that drive. And, let me tell you, it didn't stop raining from the moment I got south of Birmingham to getting north of Birmingham on the drive back. But it was a very, very interesting little trip down south to Southampton, not just for me, but obviously for Man City as well. I think we should get straight in. City were beaten 2-0. The Carabao Cup journey ends for another season. It feels weird to say that they're going to go 2 years without winning the Carabao Cup, but they were absolutely deservedly beaten by a very good Southampton side. You were watching from home. What did you make of it? Because Pep Guardiola said it was more to do with the attitude, but he didn't exactly name a starting 11 that sort of filled everyone with confidence at the start, did he?
No, it was one of those games where he gave minutes to a lot of fringe players to try and, make full use of the squad. It's kind of a gamble where if it pays off, it then helps in other competitions, and if it doesn't pay off, well, you saw what happened on Wednesday night. It was a strange one because it's only a week since Guardiola picked a sort of normal team against Chelsea, but played them in a wild formation, and it really didn't work, and they needed half-time changes for it to come off. I mean, we said after that one, it was hard to know whether it was the formation at fault or the players making, unusual errors. I feel like the same was true on Wednesday, but it was probably more the players. And in hindsight, maybe you can have sort of Phillips and Gomez and Ortega and Palmer, and maybe you can have two of them, but you can't have 5 or 6 of them because it felt like there were a lot of errors coming from them. And you saw for both the goals, it was kind of like a comedy of errors almost. Kind of Southampton almost couldn't believe the look how bad City were at keeping possession, and not to hone in on Gomez, who has had some very good games for City, one against United, and still looks decent going forward. But I mean, you compare him to, say, Zinchenko, who was so good at keeping the ball and passing the ball. There really isn't a comparison. So a kind of a very poor night for them, really. What did you make of it?
I think you used the word shocked there. I think I was genuinely surprised at just how bad City were. Like, yes, the formation wasn't sort of what we were expected to see. Kyle Walker was in at centre back. There was, as you say, new players coming in like Phillips, Cole Palmer, Sergio Gomez, who don't often play, and it just felt like we're so used to seeing City know where each other are and just fire these sort of triangles at each other and get out of trouble with absolute ease. But every time a player got the ball, it was like they had to stop, look where the teammate was, and then go, and it just slowed them down so much. And I think that, coupled with the fact that Southampton came out and took the game to City, I think I was saying before the game that Southampton were on a bad run of form. They were in a cup game and they had absolutely nothing to lose against City, and that made them quite dangerous. And that's really proved to be the case, because I think, as bad as City were, Southampton were very, very good in sort of forcing the issue as well. But yeah, like you say, the fringe players, I don't think anyone really covered themselves in glory. And yeah, Gomez especially, it was when his name was read out as being substituted at half time, there was a sizable number of the City away support did a cheer, and you don't often see that with a City player or a Guardiola decision. It was very telling that he'd had such a bad game, and it was the first goal where I think Ortega had played Gomez, Phillips and Walker into a bit of trouble, but they got out of it. That was fine. Gomez looked to intercept and go forward, and every single person in the ground could see what he was going to do. It was a simple ball to Grealish, but he just misplaced it completely and allowed the move to come forward, and then everyone was out of position. Laporte had to go over and cover and left the gap, and yes, it was a good goal and a good finish from, I think, Mara it was, but it was so avoidable. And yeah, the second one again, Phillips getting caught upfield. His first start, we were really hopeful that Phillips could do something and have a good game, but he just looked a little bit off the pace and nowhere near as decisive and as controlling as Rodri did. And I don't know what Ortega was doing. My first look, because I assumed that Phillips was going to win the ball, so I was sort of looking down at my laptop, and then suddenly Gineppo's racing forward. My first look is that Ortega's given the ball away perhaps or something, but he hadn't. He was just on the edge of his box for no real reason, and he played so well in the cup against Chelsea earlier in the competition, but he didn't have a good game either. And as much as it was a bad performance, I think when Guardiola looks to see how to fix it, there's probably 5 or 6 players who can immediately drop out of that lineup. But do you think there was anyone who came in and did support their sort of case to start more regularly?
Not particularly. And I think the biggest worry was Cancelo, because, here is a guy who started every match for City last season and was, I've said before, I don't think he was particularly great the first half of 2022, but he still played every game. And now he's come back in, and it's just hard to see where that player is. I mean, we all had a go at Gomez for many things, but also, a foul throw, because that is like the ultimate kind of non-professional thing to do. But Cancelo did one as well, and just looks like a shadow of the player that he was. But I think as much as you say, as much as kind of we focused on the players that came into the team, you kind of forget that, Pep had made 5 subs from like half time till 60 minutes, and you had De Bruyne and Akanji and Ake and Haaland and Rodri, and De Bruyne sends Alvarez through in the first minute of the second half, and we're thinking, right, this is a proper City team now. This means business. And then there was just nothing. Like Gavin Bazunu had absolutely nothing to do. I think the records show it's the first time City haven't had a shot on target in the match since they lost 3-0 at Liverpool in the Champions League. But also in that Champions League game, Sane had a perfectly legitimate goal ruled out for offside. So you've probably got to go back even further to find the last time City were so impotent up front. So, as much as the fringe players didn't deliver, 5 of Guardiola's best players had 30 to 45 minutes to change it and couldn't. So it wasn't really a good night for anyone.
Well, that leads me nicely onto one of my next questions, is that it did feel like that. There was 10 to 15 minutes at the start of the second half where there was a bit of attacking intent, and then nothing. I was looking at the clock and it was 70 minutes. I'm thinking, okay, if they get one back now, they might be able to get another one. Suddenly it's 85 minutes and nothing's happened. City just haven't had a go. And as much as I've been sort of singing Julian Alvarez's praises, he was anonymous for most of the game, apart from that one chance. I don't remember anything he really did. Now, whether that's because Southampton did a good marking job on him, whether he just didn't have service, I'm not sure it was all his fault. But no, I think I would agree with you that nobody could come away from that game and say they had a good game or they did well. And then after the game, Guardiola said City weren't ready. He said that it was sort of an attitude problem more than the formation. He was asked about not starting De Bruyne and Haaland, and he said even if they'd started, he had a feeling that the performance would be the same. He said it was a whole squad issue, basically, and not just the players who came in and didn't take the chance. And it sounded like he'd been expecting it for a while. When he said he had a feeling that it was going to happen, it doesn't sound like it was just a one-off. In his press conference, he was pretty calm. It was a pretty matter-of-fact assessment of it, because he was like, well, we didn't put the basics in. We didn't have the attitude or the commitment or the desire to win a game, and Southampton did. Do you think that's a concern, that we've been sort of familiar with this City side for so long, that hunt in packs and they're so aggressive in everything they do? Is it a concern that desire's sort of potentially dropped, even if it's just for one game? Is it a wider issue that maybe this result's been coming for a bit longer, do you think?
Yeah, I think it is. And it should be noted that Guardiola said after the Leeds and Liverpool games, he said, the desire and hunger shown in these games are why I signed my new contract. And after they beat 4-0 Chelsea, after they beat Chelsea 4-0 less than a week ago, Guardiola was like, this is what I want to see every week. But it's just more inconsistent than you used to seeing from City. And the Everton game, Guardiola insisted they were the better team and were very good. But they didn't look good. And like you said, there was no kind of cavalry against Southampton. The same against Everton. We sat there and were like, are they going to have a chance anytime soon? And they didn't. And I always think there's more to worry about with City when they don't create rather than when they miss chances. Because, at least it's then just kind of poor finishing, which can be easily corrected by like a Haaland. But I thought Guardiola's comments were very interesting after the game. And I also thought it was interesting that Gundogan stepped out and said, something is not right. We've been off in the last 2 weeks. The hunger and desire is lacking because, if City lose a game or draw a game, it's very easy for us in the media to go over the top because it happens so rarely. And then, you get some fans coming back saying, look, you're second in the league or whatever. Many sides would kill for that. But when the captain of the team is coming out and saying our players are not showing the right hunger or desire, that is major red flags.
That's it. And it was the manager and the captain saying exactly the same thing. So if they're noticing it, then everyone else will. And yeah, it's just something you've not really associated with City. Now, Guardiola did say that it was put to him that City had been inconsistent and they drew with Everton, and he said, well, did you see the Everton game? Because by his sort of claims, he said the only games that they played badly this season, he said, are Brentford and now against Southampton. The Brentford game, City were drawing and in that game until a breakaway in the last minute. Now, I agree that they weren't good enough to win the game and Brentford were also deserved winners, but I think this one is even more of a concern because, like you say, there was no chances created. 2 half chances from Alvarez is all they created, and they let a Southampton side who are bottom of the league and badly out of form completely dominate them and sort of pick out the weak spots. And now Nathan Jones, the Southampton manager, he was really defiant after the game because he's been under a bit of pressure, which seems a bit odd given that he's only been there 5 minutes. But he said in one of his answers, he said that they basically targeted Kalvin Phillips and said they put James Ward-Prowse a bit further up to lead the press because he's a bit more experienced. He's played City before. And the tactic, he said, was to sort of put the pressure on Phillips and then feed off that. And obviously another tactic was to put Gineppo on Gomez, which worked about 5 or 6 times. And I do want to stress that it was a very good Southampton performance, as bad as City were. But I don't. Yeah, like we've been saying, I don't think any players have played their way into form. And I'm looking at Gomez. I can't see where he gets another start this season because in the FA Cup, Arsenal are going to come to the Etihad, and they're obviously the best team in England at the moment. And do you start an out of form left back against that side? I'm not sure. I think Nathan Ake he's suddenly become City's most reliable left back. You were talking about João Cancelo before. Now I got a bit of. I mean, you'll know this. If you put a player rating that is not what the majority think, you get reminded of it plenty of times in your Twitter notifications. I gave him a 6, which was probably a bit generous, but I did that because I just thought he didn't do anything wrong. He just didn't do anything right. He didn't really affect the game defensively or offensively. So maybe a 5 would have been better. But I think when you said before that the concern of his performances, that's more concerning, that he's not really doing anything. He's not necessarily doing anything wrong, but I do think Guardiola, and we can now potentially look forward to the derby coming up on Saturday. I think he's got a decision to make over who he starts in those fullback positions, because in the return game in October, it was Walker and Cancelo. That was an obvious choice. They're the 2 senior fullbacks. But now it looks like Ake might get the nod at left back because he's in form at left back, and immediately strengthened the team when he came on. And then do you move Walker back over to the right to deal with Rashford, or do you even play Rico Lewis, who's not played in the last 2 games and his position has probably strengthened? What would you do with those fullback areas? Because it seems like City have had a plan all season, and then the last few games, whether it's good performances from some or bad from the other, it's completely turned on its head now. And Cancelo is one of the main reasons for that, because he's not in great form at all.
Yeah, it has been a mad few weeks, really. If I was the manager, I would play Walker at right back, and then 2 of the 3 of Stones, Akanji and Laporte in defence, and then Ake at left back. And I think that would be extremely harsh on Rico Lewis and not at all harsh on João Cancelo, which shows how wild the transformation has been. But I mean, people will disagree. I thought Walker was poor on Wednesday night, but I put that down more to him playing out of position in an unfamiliar defence. I think he was outstanding against Chelsea at right back in the FA Cup win. So I would give him the benefit of the doubt, and he is still kind of City's best last man with his pace and the way he reads the game. And then, there's an argument you could play Lewis at left back, and he has played a bit there for the 18s, but it would be seismic if Lewis starts in terms of his potential career and the way Guardiola currently sees him. But I think, like you say, Ake is currently the best City defender, and has shown he can play at left back. It wouldn't be easy for him against Marcus Rashford, but if you give him a solid defender to his right, I think that's probably the best option. But I mean, it's the same with Cancelo, Phillips, a few others. They will need to play, but I don't know what games coming up you would be kind of comfortable starting them in.
Well, this is it. The fixtures don't get any easier. It's Tottenham after the derby, then Wolves, who are looking quite good under Lopetegui. And there is one argument to say that going out of the Carabao Cup does give City a bit of a breather in those 2 midweeks towards the end of the month. Arsenal away at the end of... is it the end of the month or the first game in February? So City don't want to lose games, but Guardiola might not complain that he's got a little bit more time to work on these issues on the training ground. I'm going to pick you up on something you just said. Ake, you feel, is the best City defender at the moment this season? Are you talking left back or just generally? I think he's had a very good season, but
it's not just me that said it; it's Pep that said it. So I'm on firm ground.
Oh, well.
Yeah, I just think he's very good. You could argue that John Stones has been, and I wouldn't have any issue with that. But I kind of think John Stones was City's best defender last season, and we kind of expect that if John Stones is anywhere near his best, he is City's best defender. I think it's been more of a surprise for Ake, who has always kind of been fourth choice, and even at the end of last season, it felt a bit strange that kind of Fernandinho was playing at centre-back with Laporte rather than Ake. I know there were apparently minor injury issues, but he was still kind of on the bench, so it did feel like he wouldn't break through. And I just think he'd been terrific for City this season at centre back and left back. He kind of gives you that confidence that few defenders do. And he had a terrific World Cup with the Netherlands. He's come straight back in, fitted in. I'm really, really, really impressed with him this season.
I'm not going to argue too much. I think he has been brilliant on whether it's at centre back or left back. And you mentioned before it'll be tough for him against Marcus Rashford, but he did relatively well to keep Mo Salah quiet in the first game back against Liverpool. It seems like every challenge that is put against him, he's passing now with flying colours. And I think what's impressed me most about Ake this season is the sort of last ditch tackles. There's been a few times where the team's looked to break, or he might even have lost the ball, but then he'll recover with a really good sliding tackle that just takes the pressure off completely. And as bad as City were at Southampton, his presence immediately just solidified them and improved them and restricted Southampton to sort of their first half tactic of putting Gineppo up against Sergio Gomez. They couldn't do that. From as soon as he came on, that was a no-go anymore. I think Manuel Akanji deserved credit as well, because he came on and strengthened the centre of defence. I saw a few criticisms saying, City need 2 goals and they're bringing on 2 defenders, but it was the defence that was the issue at Southampton. So those 2 changes made sense, and I would expect both of those to start in the derby. And I might be tempted to, if it was me, to start Rico Lewis. I just think City have looked a lot more comfortable and balanced when he's played in the last 5 to 10 games. Now, I think Walker will start for his experience and just his pace against whether it's Rashford or Martial or whoever plays on that side. But if City want to sort of get back to the system that they know, which is sort of being a bit more fluid in a back three when they sort of have possession but adding an extra body in midfield, I think Lewis is the better player at the moment. You would have always said Cancelo was, but he's clearly not in good form. Lewis is in better form. And every time he's been given a big hurdle to overcome, whether it's in pre-season against the big teams that they played or the big, like he's not played in small games, has he? He's played against Chelsea, Liverpool, he's played at Ellen Road, he's played in the Champions League. I don't think a start at Old Trafford would faze him. It would be massive, as you say. But I think he could do it, and I wouldn't put it past Guardiola to at least consider it, or maybe bring him off the bench if he's needed. So just for the purposes of a bit of balance, I'll throw a Rico Lewis start into that. Another player that I'm not too sure about his form recently is Phil Foden. Now, he played in midfield the last 2 games. I thought he looked pretty good against Chelsea when City had a lot of the ball, but when they were under pressure against Southampton, he didn't really make it stick, and there was a big gap between City's attack, which was admittedly not very existent, and the defence. And that's where you want your sort of midfielder in the Kevin De Bruyne role to get on the ball and bring it forward. I'm not also sure that he's played well enough on the wings recently to get a start at Old Trafford. And I think City's approach in general will be really, really different to the sort of swashbuckling game that they played at the Etihad. I think it'll be a lot more conservative, and especially in mind of the Southampton defeat. But do you think Foden could go from a hat-trick at the Etihad against United to maybe just a bench role at Old Trafford?
Absolutely, yeah. Although I wouldn't. I still think City are a better team with Foden in it, and most of his best work has come on the wings because that's where he's been used there. And Mahrez has been very good since the return after the World Cup. Obviously, he didn't go. Grealish hasn't been bad at all. I just kind of think I don't think Foden has put in as many poor performances as Cancelo, say. Cancelo, I think we're at the point where it's like you're not really cutting it in the first team at the moment, whereas Foden just hasn't been given the chance. Played like an hour at Chelsea in a mad formation and then 2 games in the middle. So he's not really had a game on the wing in your traditional City formation. And that might be because he's not doing enough in training, and Guardiola didn't pick him for quite a while before the international break. But at the same time, I just think he is so good. And it's like, when he didn't play for Gareth Southgate and all the fuss was like, why isn't Foden playing? Because he is that good. And, I think he is a kind of player that can win you matches with explosive bits of pace. And United are much, much improved on when City beat them 6-3. But at the same time, are they? I think Saturday will be a good test. If we kind of look to United are on a long winning run, but those games are like, let me find it. Villa, Fulham, Burnley, Forest, Wolves, Bournemouth, Everton, Charlton. So you could say, right, well, they beat Everton and City didn't. But at the same time, it's not a long list of the best teams in the league there that they've beaten. So, yes, they look much better and the defence seems to be very good. But at the same time, they've not come up against someone like City for that kind of real test to see how far they've come. So, you know, I agree with you, and I think that City will be far less kind of flamboyant, but I just kind of think, well, why don't you try? Why don't you just give it a go and see how United hold up? Because they won't be used to the quality of player that City have got. And, you know, it could be another rout if City really turn it on against them.
Well, this is it. I asked our colleague Tyrone, who watches United more than we do, and he said, yes, they've been good, but the opposition haven't been all that, and the games that United would expect to win. And the only reason people are talking about it is because they have won, and in the past they haven't been winning these games and been slipping up. So, I mean, on one hand, you've got to win those games if you want to do anything in the season, and they'll only be a point behind City if they win, I think, if I've done my maths right in the table. But yeah, City will feel confident as they always do. I think there's some more Ilkay Gundogan quotes which says, yes, we weren't good, but maybe the Southampton defeat was the wake-up call we need, and especially going into a derby at United, there is always a confidence because City probably know they have better players, and if they have a bit of a point to prove, and if they're sort of going to be a bit dangerous after losing a game in the manner that they did, then I'm sure there's a lot of players who'll want to put things right. And it seems like Gundogan knows what's gone wrong, and De Bruyne was probably one of the better performers when he came on, even if he couldn't help them back. Now, Haaland didn't get a goal, but he would love to get one at Old Trafford. Did he say at the start of the season that this was the fixture that he was looking out for the most? So he's going to be bang up for it as well. You've got players like Phil Foden who are local who will also be ready to give United a game at Old Trafford. And with all the noise of, oh yeah, United are back and this is going to be the sort of closest derby in years, I'd imagine there'll be a few at City who don't want to hear that and might take that a little bit personally. And I suppose if you've had one terrible result, you could look at it and say a derby is a really good one to get back at, because you can't go hiding. You can't have an attitude that is anything less than perfect. So they've got to be on it. And when City are on it, they often win these games. I think he will go with the sort of formation he often does in these games of De Bruyne, Gundogan and Bernardo. I think he'll look at recent games and think, right, I need a bit more control in this midfield, especially with the United midfield three actually looking like they can put a tackle in nowadays rather than the McTominay and Fred combination that you used to be able to walk through. I think he'll go with that, and maybe Riyad Mahrez as the other player. That doesn't strike too much sort of flair as we've touched on, but you can then bring on Foden, Grealish, those sort of players. I think it'll be a very different lineup to the 6-3. But I think I would agree with you that City are probably going to be favourites for the game if they turn up. And I would imagine that the last few days have been Guardiola and Gundogan and all the coaches saying, yeah, you can't get any worse than you did against Southampton, and there's got to be an improvement. Do you think there's any areas of that United team that can cause City problems? They've obviously got Marcus Rashford, who's in very, very good form. They might, do we know if they've signed Wout Weghorst yet? I don't know if he'd play, but they might have something different to give City if he is available. I think it will be a game where United will feel as confident as they have in a long time.
Yeah, I mean, United have apparently got the best defensive midfielder in the city, the league, and the world. So I think Rodri might enjoy having a look at that over the weekend. Rashford is obviously in terrific form, and his level of performance is now back up to near his best, which will obviously worry City. You know, he was worrying them as a teenager when he was just breaking into the side, and it hasn't changed that that pace and skill can unsettle any defender. So I think City do need to be careful. I mean, Anthony scored at the Etihad from nowhere really. So there are issues for City to deal with, but at the same time, I think they've always had success against United when they've played the game on their terms, when they've been able to control the game and carry out their plan. They've scored more than United, and I think United have won 2 of the last 10 meetings at Old Trafford. City have been much better against United away from home than they have at home, and maybe that's because United have been more content to sit back and counter at the Etihad, and then they've been picked off. But United are more dangerous because they are in form, but also if they are in form and going for it, will they be kind of under a bit more pressure to be more active and aggressive than they have been in recent derby matches, which will open up space for City. So I think City are still comfortable favourites for it, but they will be bothered by United a bit more. I feel like United were in a decent bit of form, 5 wins from 6 when they came to the Etihad, including wins over Liverpool and Arsenal. So, they were all right then, and then they got absolutely creamed at the Etihad. It was kind of very lucky for them to get 3 in a 6-3. So, I just think it'll be a real test of where United are, because we kind of know where City are. But it's, if United win this, then they're firmly in the title race.
Yeah, I think I'd sort of come on this podcast thinking, maybe United are favourites because City was so bad at Southampton and they just looked completely lost and alien to the side that we're used to. And now I might have convinced myself that no, because they will clearly respond. They'll bring back all the players, and when City are at their best, they are going to be better than United. So, yeah, I think as well, the Etihad game was sort of a bit of an anomaly, because normally we've seen that the away side have sort of done better in recent years in the derby. City have a very decent record at Old Trafford. They know what it's like and what's needed to sort of silence that crowd and take the game to United. So they would love to do that again. I think I've gone from thinking United might nick it to no, of course they're not. City are going to do it. Now, before I get a score prediction off you, there is a far more pressing question to ask you this week, and it's the one that dominated the City dressing room, which is: would you rather fight a hippo or a crocodile, Simon?
Well, having not given the answer or the question much thought before, I think I've been sided, convinced by the majority of the squad, other than Rodri, to say that Hippo would be bad. Although a colleague of mine said that he would rather a hippo because then his death would be quicker.
Well, yeah, there is that.
I kind of thought, I can see the logic behind that as well. What would you go for?
Well, I've always thought like crocodiles and alligators terrify me because they're so fast. But my girlfriend recently, I asked her the question and she pointed out all you've got to do is just put the mouth shut and they can't open it. So that seems like a way that you could win. So I'll fight a crocodile. I'll do that. Right. Now, the less important question: what score do you think it's going to be?
I think 2-0 City. I don't think it'll be a complete obliteration like it was in October, but I kind of think City will have the majority of the possession and control and get enough goals for it to be comfortable. And like you say, they will respond from the Southampton results, I would say.
I don't think we'd hear the end of it if they were as bad as they were. I think I'll go 2-1 City, but I don't think there'll be a lot in it. I think it'll be the tightest derby we've seen in quite a while. I'm looking forward to it. I always like it when there's some actual jeopardy in these games, and I think for the first time in a while we will actually have that, just because City might have lowered slightly to United's level and United have risen a bit. So I think it'll be, like you say, a good test for United, but also a good test for City to respond from maybe some inconsistent form in recent weeks. So enjoy your trip to Old Trafford on Saturday, and we will have updates from City, from United, from everything that's happening from the derby weekend. Nice early kickoff on Saturday. You can follow that on our Twitter, our Facebook, and on the manchesterevening.news.co.uk. And we've also got new videos and updates on our new YouTube channel. That's, I think, mancity_men. But if you search Manchester Evening News, Manchester City on YouTube, you will find us, where we'll have lots of content on there. So City fans, if you can, enjoy your derby day, and we'll be back next week to discuss whatever happens at Old Trafford and see if City can do the double over United again. Thank you very much for joining us.